Okay, welcome back to the Underhand Free Throw. I am Simon, and we're on part 2 of our mock draft. If you didn't see part 1, it's the most recent video we uploaded. Picks 1 through 10 in the 2023 NBA mock draft. This is part 2, so this is 11 through 20. So let's just go ahead and get started with our 11th overall pick.
Well, you're in luck because my next player is Taylor Hendricks, so we can just jump right into talking about that.
Taylor Hendricks at number 11.
Yeah, and I'm into the comparison here because where I think Chris Murray, lacks that, one eye-popping skill and is more sort of solid overall, I see Taylor Hendricks, the elevation that he gets on that jump shot, like on these catch and shoot looks that he's getting plenty of and knocking down. He looks like he's like 10 feet tall when he takes that shot. He pulls up and no one is contesting it at all. It's just like a weird, it's a weird eye-popping part of his game in an otherwise sort of like, kind of low-key player. But I'm just like, I'll be watching footage of Taylor Hendricks and, whatever. It's fine. And then there's these shots happening and I'm like, wait, I keep going back to look how tall he is. Like, I'm just like, is this guy 7 feet tall? Like, what am I? He didn't look 7 feet tall in other aspects of the game, but the elevation of that jumper is a really like serious tool, I think, that's really going to translate well to the NBA. And on top of, like what he's already able to do in terms of his like on-ball defense. And he's got a pretty good motor. So does Chris. Yeah. Chris is a really active player as well. But I see more in terms of both on-ball defense and as a little bit of like a, sneaky little rim protector sometimes. And I like Taylor Hendricks' high-end upside a little bit more.
No, yeah, Taylor Hendricks is a guy I fell in love with very early in the college basketball season. He's another freshman, so yeah, I agree. He might have higher upside than a guy who's a junior and not as incredible of an athlete like Chris Murray. But yeah, Taylor Hendricks is such a massive net rating outlier. Like UCF is 100% a tournament team when he's on the floor, and they're like garbage, like like one of the worst teams in college basketball when he's off of it. And that's a little bit hard to judge what's happening there. I mean, obviously they don't have as much talent as a Big Ten roster, so maybe it's just like he's such a incredible upgrade over whoever's coming in to the game.
I mean, he gives like college guards a pick and roll target. Both like both can catch and shoot and as like a physical presence on the inside. So if UCF doesn't have that other wear on their roster, like they're just sort of like it seems like the whole offense, like the offense is kind of built around having that release and that option to go to.
Yeah, I had Taylor Hendricks in my top 10 for most of the year. Just moved him down to like.
You moved him down for Chris Murray.
I have him on the same level essentially, but the thing that really impressed me the most with Taylor Hendricks, like yes, he's a 6'9" guy who can shoot, but his ability to switch out on the perimeter and stay in front of at least college guards was really impressive. We'll see how that holds up. Like I don't know if he can do that against. I don't know if he can do that against like Ja Morant or anything, but. Just the fact that he can switch defensively. He's already doing that and succeeding. I'm sure has many NBA scouts salivating at the mouth.
Yeah, and the 80% free throw percentage is just like, I think this guy's, even though people didn't really project him as a shooter like a few years ago, like I think he's proven this shot as much as you can in college. And the sort of like college always just ends up being a small sample size for shooting. I forget, someone was doing a study of like, at what number of 3-point attempts you can actually normalize the sample of data, and it's like more than most people take in college. So it's like sometimes that's why we sometimes get these like shooters who shrivel up in the NBA or shooters who pop that we expected to be shooting liabilities. But so I picked Taylor Hendricks. I to be clear, there's a whole bunch of players in this tier that I'm like could go a million ways with. So who's your next pick?
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can blow your mind here.
All right.
I'm also having a very recent change. There's a couple guys that I have like right in this range, like just a hair below Taylor Hendricks. But the guy I'm actually gonna pick, just due to the absolutely insane difference in his team's performance when he's on the floor versus off of it, is actually gonna be Derek Lively from Duke.
Okay, I've got him at 26 for the record. Derek, okay. So Okay, yeah, you make your case. Or I mean, is it like, I mean, we are like the on-off numbers, great, but what do you like about the game?
I have come to believe that I think Derek Lively can hold up defensively in the NBA.
Yeah, I think that too. I think
For a 7'1" guy with his physical presence, I just think that's incredibly valuable. If you can get a guy with that size, who's so strong and imposing, if you can just get him to stay on the floor, against a modern NBA offense, that's incredibly valuable piece.
I just don't know how. Like, I just don't know how. You said big. I agree with the big part. I don't agree with strong or imposing. Like, he's a lot more finesse than I expected him to be.
Yeah.
He looks like, like a little bit of that, like DeAndre Ayton, like no one is allowed to ever touch me when I have the ball in my hands. I'm like going to make a big priority over that. I think Derek Lively's potential lies in that like short roll center who's a really, really willing passer with pretty decent vision. Like he hits the corners really well. In that Duke offense, like he's a really just good like hub to get the ball in, and he's going to move it. Like that's something that is sometimes like NBA centers now have to be able to do that if they're going to play pick and roll basketball.
Yeah.
You can't. There's very few, even like players like Clint Capella, who previously were just hard rim runners, have had to learn to at least hit the corners. So Derek Lively already has a jump start on that. He's not going to need to be taught that in the NBA. But I just wonder, is he going to even be able to be a role threat if no one like?
Yes, I think so. This is another huge improvement guy who he sucked at the start of the season. It was unclear that he understood how to play the game of basketball in any way, shape, or form. And by the end of the season, he is anchoring one of the best defenses in college basketball. And he is switchable. He is light on his feet enough. And when I say imposing presence, I mean here's a 7'1" guy with long arms and a huge body,
really long arms. Like I think he got like a 7'7" wingspan. Like I mean, he was this is like a top high school.
Yeah,
prospect.
I mean, there's still the question
chip.
how much he's going to welcome the physicality. Is he going to be like it? If he is a DeAndre Ayton, I'm a lot less excited about him. But I mean, this is a guy who's also he's improved his effective field goal, his shooting efficiency quite a bit as the season has gone on. He has been just like more decisive when he receives the ball, just like immediately dunking, immediately, drop stepping towards the basket, less hesitation, less, mental processing going on when he catches. And just like Duke is not a team that has like bad depth at the 5, and just the fact that they're this insane defense when he's on the floor and is just kind of mediocre whenever he's not on the floor. I don't know.
What's Duke's starting lineup? Like because I look at all these players as prospects, and I'm like, I don't even know which like does Filipowski start?
Yes.
Okay.
Derek Whitehead, who's another guy who was kind of exciting going into the year. Jeremy Roach, who's not an NBA prospect in my opinion, and I think Tyrese Proctor has started a decent amount this season. Who was on some draft boards early in the year. He was a good player in Australia, and has just been really inefficient at the college level. So maybe a guy we'll get excited about next year.
Yeah. Okay. It's just like all these Duke guys. I'm like, how many? Like, anyways, it's often like that with Kentucky and Duke. Like, if you're not watching a ton of the actual full games being played by these teams, and understanding what the pecking order is. Okay, Derek Lively. Yeah, that did surprise me. I am high on some of his skills. I just sort of wonder the places in which he's been a little bit of a zero concern me. Mm-hmm. In that, like, is he going to be able to do some basic stuff at the NBA level? But also, I'm all for huge bodies like that taking.
Ian, this is an upside pick. I'm not even considering the idea that he doesn't develop and he just ends up being some like whatever off the bench big. I'm considering best case scenario, and for me, that's exciting.
I do just get worried with prospects when they have these really strange holes in their game where you're like, if you can't fill this hole and get this to a normal NBA level, like. But sometimes I overreact to that. Like I was low on both like the Ball twins because of their like the weird holes in their game sort of thing. So sometimes going off that high pick, but like
I was too. I was like LaMelo Ball can't shoot from anywhere on the court, and then it turns out
or
NBA
like
spacing he can. So
yeah, I was more concerned with just his complete lack of like physical presence on the court. He was just this sort of like skinny, gangly, like had to exist in this weird bubble of space because he couldn't, and he ended up being like a really, really good defender. So, all right, so I guess that leaves me to take, and there's there's 3 players right here that I. Even looking at them, I'm like, I kind of want to boost this player above that. But you know what? I'm going to. I'll tell you, in a couple picks, I'll tell you who really fell on draft night for me in a surprising way. But I'm going to go with Kason Wallace here.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Ooh, that's a stink face. Kason Wallace gets a stick face.
All right, lay out the case for Kason.
Everyone already knows about the high-level 3-and-D play. Already knows that there's like a, catch and shoot and... arguably the best perimeter defender in basketball. I think he's both like a really good on-ball defender and a sneaky, smart, like guard help defender, and that he he knows when to dig, he knows when to like help in recovery. He's just like he's smart at all those things and an absolute hound on the ball. But where I think like if you're just watching film, like he's a lot better of an interior scorer than. Like a lot of the guards, like a lot of guards who are getting a lot more hype for their offensive players cannot score at the rim in college at all, and Kason Wallace can. So you're drafting him as a 3-and-D guy, which is like all I hear is people discuss his 3-and-D potential. I'm like, this guy's regularly getting to the rim and getting his shot off as well. I'm not sure how much of an NBA tool that's going to be for him, but I think that like offers him the tiniest bit of upside on top of already being like arguably the best guard defender in this draft. Now explain the stink face.
I can see it. I mean, okay, so I had Kason Wallace higher for much of the year. He's dropped recently for me, and the main reason why is he's gotten worse offensively as the season has gone on. And a lot of guys have, so this isn't uncommon. As you get deeper into conference play, I mean, maybe you're hitting a bit of a freshman wall for a guy in Kason's case where this is his first season playing college basketball. And you're going up against better defenses, simply put. If you're in a major conference, the average defense you face is going to be a lot better than the average defense you face in a non-conference game. But I guess I just, much like you felt with Derek Lively, I question the tools outside of defending specifically players similar sized or smaller. One-on-one individual defense, which I think is a skill that is still valuable, but less valuable than it used to be in the modern NBA. And then he's got the corner 3 shot, and like you said, he can get to the rim, and he's not a terrible finisher. But I just want to see more of that. Like, yeah, I agree. Like, that's a solid role player. But I just want to see
I'm firmly in role player territory. Like, I don't have anyone else left on my board who I think has more than role player potential. Well, besides, a couple of projects.
My comparison for Kason Wallace was Lou Dort. And he's not as thick or stocky as Lou Dort is. But
much better shooter at the same age.
Yeah. I think he's in a large pool of a bunch of players that are probably going to be good role players, but like I just have guys who have slightly higher upside than him ahead of him.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at this point in the draft again. What I think is only 8 deep. I'm balancing upside and like projectability a little bit. Yeah. Like we haven't named Gigi Jackson yet, for example. Like there's lots of players left who have big swing potential.
We're gonna get to him,
but. Probably not on my board today. If we're I've mentioned before he's kind of like this like line where I'm basing prospects off of, like, do I want them more or less than Gigi Jackson sort of thing. But I've got Gigi Jackson at 19, so okay. And I feel we've been going for a while. Maybe we're only going to get the lottery done today.
Well, this is our last lottery pick here.
Yeah.
So I do have Gigi Jackson at 14, but there's a name that hasn't come up yet, so I'm gonna have to go with him. I have Bryce Sensabaugh out of Ohio State.
I have him one spot under Gigi Jackson.
As our number 14 pick.
Yeah.
I liked Bryce Sensabaugh's game. I just think this is a highly skilled offensive player. Ohio State's kind of like weirdly super reliant on him to be on the floor, to be like a competent offense. Like everything kind of falls to pieces when he's off the floor. I mean, I think he looks kind of small when he's on the court, but he does measure at 6'6" with a plus wingspan, and he does have that frame, kind of like other guys that we've been talking about. He's a stocky dude. He's a pretty good athlete. So I do trust that some of the shot creation ability will translate. He's a really good 3-point shooter, and yeah, I mean that's really all I have to say about him. Just plus offensive wing, who has physicality to kind of hold up on the other side of the floor.
He's the kind of guy that if he comes out of the combine and I find out he's like 6'7" barefoot and has a really big wingspan, I'll change my perspective on him. But I don't like the small, thick wing whose game is entirely based around scoring is one of my most loathed college archetypes. Bryce Sensabaugh is a scoring like demigod in college. Like he's really fun to watch. Just like his ability to just sort of like carve out space with that strength and the shooting touch and the footwork. Like I really like. If I was a college basketball fan, I would like watching Bryce Sensabaugh score. But I don't like. What is that in the NBA? I don't love the defense. I don't love the vision. I don't think he's got playmaking creativity. I don't think his defense is like horrible or anything. I just don't like. There's a lot of really good defensive prospects in this draft.
You want to hear my comparison for him?
Yeah,
it's probably not going to make you excited, but I have Ben Mathurin as my comparison for Sensabaugh.
I think he's bigger than him though. Mathurin is like outrageously physical for his size, but he's slighter. He's skinnier. Like Sensabaugh's got some beef on him. I think of Malachi Branham. He's a little taller than that, so. And Malachi Branham's doing really well as a scorer right now on the worst team, the second worst team in the NBA. But
makes sense. He replaced Malachi Branham at Ohio State, so
yeah, just filling right in that role.
A similar offense totally makes sense how they're playing similar.
Yeah, or Ochai Agbaji. No, Ochai Agbaji was a little bit more of an off-ball kind of type. It's not the same sort of on-ball score. But I've already like complained about you a lot of like this kind of college player. So that's gonna I feel the same way about Dariq Whitehead, but I've got Bryce Sensabaugh like a million spots ahead of Dariq Whitehead. So I mean he's still in my top 20. And that's the end of the lottery. I had two players fall out of the lottery entirely on my draft board into our mock draft.
Do you want to run through some more picks really quick, or what do you think?
Yeah. I want to select Jalen Hood-Schifino with this next 15? Pick. Okay. Yeah, and he's actually the player that I kept dropping him. I've had him as high as 9 on the draft board. He's a really difficult player to project. If you look at if you just look at his stats, I think you come away a little bit underwhelmed. And if you watch him every night, you probably know how maddening an experience it is, how inconsistent he is. Like if you watch, he's one of those you always like the old Draft Express videos that would like shower prospects with praise with the strengths and then just like bury them with the weaknesses section. You'd come away being like, I don't know how to feel. He'd have sometimes he looks very boring and unspectacular at everything and unable to score at the rim and not that great a shooter. And then on nights where he's feeling it, he looks like an awesome shooter. He looks like the best pick and roll general in college basketball. He just has a lot of control in the middle of the floor. He traps defenders in jail. He gets to his pull-up really nicely. He's got really good vision. He makes all the passes that you want a player to make out of the pick and roll. And when I look at college players a lot, I forgive a lot of inconsistency because I do want to see like these players are going to get better and therefore more consistent and more able to achieve the best versions of themselves. So I'm drafting Jalen Hood-Schifino based off of the high end of what I've seen and forgiving the off nights that have dragged down his statistical profile overall and made him look a lot less spectacular than I've seen him overall.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everything is just so inefficient with him. I mean, he's such a poor efficiency scorer, like from literally everywhere on the court, and I don't think he's as good of an athlete as advertised because of how not only how much he struggles to finish around the rim, but how quick he is to settle for the pull-up mid-range jump shot out of the pick and roll.
I mean, I wouldn't even say settle. I would say like that's his entire game is based around that mid-range pull-up threat. But then he's a passer. But yeah, I mean, the lack of rim scoring I think is a legit knock against
Okay.
him. I'm just at the point of the draft where like I'm looking at all these guards and being like, none of you score at the rim. You're all
Yeah.
absolutely putrid rim scorers. So I'm taking Jalen's pick and roll ability over some guards that are high on a lot of people's draft boards, but apparently not on any of ours because I'm still not ready to
Yeah.
pick either
I'm-
of those two players. Are
I'm
you?
cool with that being our number 15. And then I'll just go with
Yeah,
Gigi
we're-
Jackson next.
Okay, that's my 19.
I just Gigi Jackson. He's just kind of like toolsy, and at the moment, those tools are like a pair of child scissors and like a rubber mallet. But like a 6'9" guy that has the handle and the pull-up game to like get a shot from wherever, and he has some strength barreling to the rim. He just makes such poor decisions with the basketball. Like that's the main question. So this is really a question of coaching. And the comp for him I had as actually had Jonathan Kuminga as a guy who I think has kind of a similar physical athletic profile who also just was not good at basketball.
Gigi Jackson doesn't
into
get
the
up like
NBA.
that though.
Right, no, he doesn't have the vertical leaping ability. I
Yeah.
just like the body and the frame and a little bit of a handle.
Super strong, like ball handling bully for sure.
Yeah. Who's your number 17?
I just like will say one thing about Gigi Jackson. He's the only person in this draft where I'm like, you might be too dumb. You might like you're the only one that I'm really worried about.
Yeah.
That brain. If he like
Basketball
if he
IQ.
if we see development, that's like that changes everything. If he's able to like learn and adapt and change the game, because I think is he the youngest player in the draft? Like, I think that matters a lot. So I think it's dumb to be completely out on Gigi Jackson, but I am concerned over. Yeah, like he seems like an old school kind of Antoine Walker dummy with some of the stuff he does on the ball and like the lack of shame that comes with that. Next up, I've got Jet Howard, who I've got mixed feelings about, but
No love for Nick Smith. Okay. Yeah, Jet Howard. I think it's a solid pick. What do you like about Jet Howard?
Well, aside of Grady Dick, he's the other arguable. He's like got a less pretty but just as effective jump shot. I think he has really good. He's got sneaky good passing ability. I see a lot of like basketball IQ in some of the reads he makes. He comes off these screens. He's got this big body that he doesn't really use for much, but he does make really good reads whenever he faces defensive pressure. He's not like. I wouldn't say he's like an amazing passer or like a high assist player, but someone who knows how to already at college has figured out like, oh, this team's really afraid of my shooting threat, so I'm going to get the ball and I'm going to make them think I'm going to shoot, and then I'm going to get the ball to that spot of the court where the defense is vulnerable. Doesn't always generate assists, but I think he really punishes defenses for overplaying him. That's the shooting passing or like the shooting vision decision making synergy is all I really like about him. I don't love the defense. I don't love the physical game overall. Like he seems like he's got these big shoulders and I barely see him like he scores a little bit on the interior, but I don't see that being existing at all in the NBA. Like he's scoring just by being bigger than guys right now, but I do like just not just the shooting, but how he kind of like thinks of the next level of what to do with that shooting is what I like about Jet Howard.
Yeah, I had him a little bit lower just because the poor athleticism and the lack of ability to be a defensive stopper at all. I think he's going to have to be a 4 in the NBA, and he's going to have some physical disadvantages against other NBA 4s. So yeah, he's just kind of a weird fit. He's kind of like a 3.5, doesn't have the foot speed to guard threes, doesn't have the strength to guard bigger players, but is a really, really good shooter. So if you're looking for just like a pure shooter who, maybe can not be a disaster on defense, not a bad way to go.
Yeah. And I'm far out of the territory of thinking I'm going to get a really, really good NBA player at this point. So I feel comfortable.
Well, I'm
with Jet
still
Howard.
there.
Yeah. All right. Who you got next?
Number 18, Keontae George out of Baylor.
Okay, that's my next pick too. I had Keontae George at 14 on my board.
Okay. I dropped him significantly just because of how bad the efficiency has been and how it hasn't gotten better over the college season. But like the skill level is clearly there. The results aren't consistent yet, but the other thing I really like about Keontae George is pretty decent He runs pick and roll quite a bit at Baylor, more and more so as the
Yeah.
season's gone on, and he's not bad at it. He can be a capable secondary playmaking option. I think he's not just a scorer or shooter. And my comp for him is I had Jordan Poole, and unfortunately some of the negatives of Jordan Poole with shot selection and decision making come along with that. But just in terms of like his ability to like relocate, to kind of like contort his body where like no matter where he is on the court, he can like get squared up and get a shot off, with very little time. So yeah, that's what I like about George.
I think he's a much better on ball defender than Jordan Poole has ever been. Like I think he really puts up a good fight. As an on ball defender, I've seen him make some great defensive plays. I do think as an off ball defender, he's just as brain dead. Like he definitely is a. What is it like? How do players get caught backdoor? All like how can you not learn? It's the most embarrassing. I think it's worse than getting crossed up sometimes is like giving up an open baseline dunk because you just were not looking at like you didn't notice the player you were assigned to snuck behind you. Like I think it's way more embarrassing than some of these guards seem to think it is because they keep letting themselves get back cut. So bad help defender. I think strong on ball defender. I think he's a really good like pick and roll. My comp is D'Angelo Russell. I think he's got this like, he's a really cold-blooded perimeter shot creator. And he's like 6'4". We'll see like where the wingspan lands to see if he does have like that combo guard size. Not an overwhelming athlete. I'm really concerned about the level of separation he gets on some of these shots. Like he's hitting a ton of. He gets this beautiful step back. Hits this pull-up three, but you're watching but the defender stayed right with him. Like he's shooting that with the ball, and like what happens when that defender is 2 inches taller with a longer wingspan and a little I don't. That's a little bit worrisome for me. It's just like I don't see him ever generating any separation on any of his shots, and I really worry about tough shot makers just turning into nothing at the NBA level.
Well, you say he's hitting them. I mean, he's not really hitting them. His
that's
effective field goal
point.
is under 50%. Like it's not good. And Baylor's actually a better offensive team when he's on the bench, by a pretty significant margin. So
yeah, I think you can see why people are high on. Like I know really smart like draft people who have him in their top 5, like just because his like the bag is so enticing, like the handles, the moves, and everything. But I'm like, what about how it's not really working at college, and why do you think that's going to work in the NBA?
It's that trap of the score first small guards who like you said.
Yeah, where do you have the other one?
Well, let's do your number 19.
All right. Okay, so what do I got? I got Maxwell Lewis next.
Yikes!
And I think
it's a yikes for me.
Why is that the yikes for you? He's a pretty he's not even like an interesting or exciting thing. I see a little skinny, but we got a high end athlete who like a really high end athlete in terms of his hops. Capable, promising 3-point shooter with some defensive potential. Oh, that's where I land on him. Give me the yikes version.
I have him at 31.
Yeah, okay.
In the second round. I was higher on Maxwell Lewis earlier in the year. He has slumped so hard. He has been terrible in the second half of the college basketball season. And I don't really know why. I mean, this kind of happened to him last year, too. He theoretically should be like a decent 3-and-D player, because he is 6'7". He is a pretty good athlete. He's a theoretical good shooter. His mechanics look pretty sound. He has improved quite a bit, like from this season to last season. But I guess my main concern with him is just the consistency is all off. His consistency, not only shooting, but just kind of like making plays with the ball and deciding what to do when it's in his hands, seems kind of all over the place. This is, for me, along with Gigi Jackson, another like low basketball IQ worry that I would have.
I don't project him as any kind of an isolation scorer in the NBA. Like I see him do that in college. I know he's had some like moments where it looks like he like gets a nice spin move and gets into his length and gets a finger roll. But it's like I don't see anything he's doing as an ISO scorer being at an NBA level, and I don't think he's ever going to be like strong enough to operate that way. I think of him as a like I picture him as like a 3-and-D player with a little bit of versatility. That's where I see him landing the NBA. I don't care I've already said this about about Jalen Hood-Schifino, but like I don't care as much about like slumps and consistency in college because I don't think they're just so young and haven't really like I just expect all these players to be figuring out a lot more in the NBA when a lot is more demanded on them from like an efficiency and much smaller role and stuff like that, where in college we see all these guys operating in these like massive roles being expected to do a whole bunch of things not doing. Like I don't expect Maxwell Lewis to be really good at that over a college season.
Yeah, my main worry is just like 3-and-D potential I think is there, but I want something more. I want 3-and-D plus ability to get to rim, ability to run pick and roll, ability to be like a switchable guy. I don't know what that plus is with him. I
think just being an athlete
spot up
in transition
and guard his position. Yeah, I mean I could see that. Maybe I'm too low on him. Maybe I'm too harsh on the idea that Pepperdine tried to increase his role and he kind of sucked when they asked him to do that. So
yeah,
but
I do not.
Okay,
yeah.
Number 20, I have Julian Phillips out of Tennessee. And I actually have him a bit higher on my draft board than this. He's just outside the lottery.
So I just got before you get into Julian Phillips, like because he's this player that I have in this big group of players where I just don't know which one to choose. The one thing I like about Julian Phillips is that like I believe in his shot with that, like with his free throw percentage being so high. I'm like, okay, he's one of these 3-and-D prospects that is probably going to be able to shoot, but like, you know, separating him from like Emmanuel Miller or like there's a whole like Jalen Slauson, like Tifo Leonard Jr., Andre Jackson Jr., like a lot of these guys who are not currently like awesome shooters, like not shooting threes well right now. Why pick Julian Phillips out of that group?
I think the main reason for me is just like once again, improvement. He is so much better now than he was at the start of the season. And he is a 19-year-old, so maybe you should expect that. But like I think his length and athleticism is kind of special in comparison to some of those other guys that you mentioned. He's taller and he's longer, and he has like really quick hands and good defensive instincts. I've seen him just watching some Tennessee games. I've seen him just like block some shots where like he's got his arms out in his defensive stance, and then he sees his defender start to rise up, and his like arms just like immediately pop up, and he's so long and gets off the ground so quickly that he can just like swat people. And then the other thing I would say is his shot was terrible to start the year. He still can't really get to the rim. He doesn't really have much of a handle. It's gotten a little bit better, but like this is an off-ball spot-up shooter at this point. Who knows? Yep. He is super young. And he was a very highly touted prospect out of high school, so that may improve. But Tennessee's offense is super gunky. Like the style of offense they play, they always have two non-shooting bigs on the floor that are camped out around the rim. They're really a jump shooting team, and they've had some really inconsistent results. They've gotten blown out by some mediocre teams this season. Like not a lot, but it has happened a couple times. I think they got like murdered by Kentucky. And the reason why is just like they can really struggle to score if you junk it up. So that's like his Julian Phillips shooting efficiency still isn't great, but he is knocking down that corner three.
He has touch.
I just think his shot is going to be it's going to be good, and the defensive potential is really high.
So I like Julian Phillips. I have such a hard time with this kind of prospect because like I basically like I make this big list of all the elite college defenders who might have some offensive potential in the NBA, and then I'm just like, and now what do I do with this list? Like, so I mean, you know, you being really really high in or seeing something special in there like sort of matters because I watch footage on these guys. I'm like, yeah, maybe. I know that like 3 of you are going to become indispensable on NBA rosters, but I don't know which 3. Well, you know, there's also Matthew Cleveland. There's like there's a lot of players like this.
I think Julian Phillips is really tall, really athletic, and really young, even compared to the other people in the same kind of tier in terms of their college basketball defensive impact.
Totally.
So that's it for part 2 of our mock draft. Part 3 of our mock draft is more just going to be talking about late round picks and sleepers. We won't go as in depth, but we'll mention a few names of guys that we like, but not quite enough to have them in the top 20. Both me and Ian had several guys, including a pretty decent crop of like big men in this year's draft class who are probably going to be like decent backups or maybe starters in the NBA. But there's a lot of them that might be picked in the late half of this first round. So we'll get into that in our next video.